You're listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast with your hosts, Derek Heid and Garrett Lay.
Hello and welcome to AAF Analyzed Week 2 Recap. As always, I am Derek Heid, and as always alongside me, Garrett Lay.
Hello.
But before we get started, do not forget, if you are listening on YouTube, to like and subscribe. If you're on Soundcloud, to like and give us a follow, and subscribe and leave us a review on our Apple podcast. Follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed to keep up with all the latest news and episode release announcements as well. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.
Yes, we have a fun and very exciting little news update that's going to probably happen either later this week or early next week, so you're definitely going to want to check out the Twitter. Hint, hint, we might be getting a new look. Who knows? Anyway, so before we get to the individual game recaps, we're going to continue to keep track of how well we do picking games. Week 2 was a little rough for me.
Week 2 is fantastic.
Yeah, it was fantastic for Derek. Rough for me. Derek went 4-0 in week 2, and I went 3-1. Thank goodness, not 1-3. That would be really bad. That puts our totals for the season so far. Derek is now 7-1, and I am now 5-3.
So we're both over 500.
We are both over 500, but I took a chance picking the Legends over the Fleet, and that was stupid. So I've learned from my mistakes.
Yep, we figured out that I am incredible at picking games, and I will continue to be just as good throughout the rest of the season.
All right, I'd like to move on from this part of the show now. And so, as we said last time, we are very willing to answer your questions from Twitter. So, before we get to the game recaps, we wanted to take some time to answer a question asked to us by Drew on Twitter. He wanted to know what cities we thought would serve as good expansion locations for the AAF next year. So, we're going to be answering that right now.
I think that my two main cities that I'm really looking at that would be great locations for the AAF, because they kind of break the norm of 7 of the 8 teams being in the South, would be Portland and St. Louis.
I like both of those, too. I like the sound of them.
So Portland is absolutely crazy for football. They love the Oregon Ducks. Auckland almost always sells out when they have home games. And St. Louis used to have the Rams. Everyone and their mother knows how upset the city was when the Rams decided that they were going to leave and go to Los Angeles. So both places already have a pretty big stadium, a pretty good football following, and I think that those places would be a great city for some professional football, especially when college isn't going on.
Yeah, I think they'd just be excellent. I think their markets are definitely big enough. Both are big sports cities in general. And like you said, they're both northern cities, so it's going to bring the AAF a little farther north.
And my last one that I was thinking could possibly be one would be Columbus. Columbus has Ohio State. They love their football. Columbus is also a pretty big city that's only professional sport, aside from the MLS, is the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I'm sure they would love to have another team there. I've been there multiple times, and they go bananas for soccer, and I could only imagine it for professional football.
So I'm in total agreement with you on those cities, but I also did have 3 of my own here. My first one is Louisville, Kentucky. I think it's a great market for football there, particularly with the University of Kentucky really playing well this year in college football. It might bring some more eyes to the football scene there. I know it is kind of close to Tennessee, but I think it is farther enough away, and it's in a whole different state to separate them from Memphis. So they'd probably end up playing in the Cardinals Stadium there, and I think it would be a great spot. Second, Milwaukee. The problem here is it would be cold during the beginning of the AAF season, that's for sure, and you'd really want to find an indoor stadium. Anyway, Milwaukee, they have the Brewers. They do like sports up there. It'd just be cold. So if they found a indoor stadium up there, but anyway, if they found a good indoor stadium they could play, I could see a team going there as well. And finally, Lincoln, Nebraska. They're nuts about football as well. Lincoln, Nebraska contains about 1/4 of the population of Nebraska, so pretty much anyone who's anyone would be able to go to the game. And, of course, I think they'd really have a great turnout there as well. So those are my 3 cities, Louisville, Milwaukee, and Lincoln.
Yeah, despite the fact that the Cornhuskers are almost always not that great in college football, I do believe they're on the rise. So if we have any Cornhusker fans, I'm not absolutely crapping on your team, but they haven't gotten more than like 5 or 6 wins in the past couple years, yet they still have incredible turnouts, and I think that professional football will do very well in Lincoln.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So we have a fun fact here about this week, and it's that every team that was losing at halftime won in the AAF, which...
They're really
yeah,
very strange.
I guess that's a lesson in you got to be able to finish your games. We were talking about finishing drives last week. You got to be able to finish the entire game, too. You got to play a full 60 minutes of football if you're going to want to win.
Absolutely. So without further ado, let's get started into our first game, the TNT Special Saturday game at 2. Salt Lake taking on Birmingham in Birmingham.
So this one, like you said, Salt Lake at Birmingham, and the Iron defeated the Stallions in, I'm not sure if I would call it a thriller, but it was relatively exciting, 12-9. So to start off this recap, both teams looked awful at the beginning. I'm not going to lie. The Stallions got nothing going on their first offensive possession, and then the Iron missed a 53-yard field goal when they got the ball, and things just really weren't going that well. The first real excitement came from a big defensive stop by the Iron on their own 7 when they forced Matt Asiata to fumble and kept the game knotted up at 0. Both teams continued to be really slow on offense, making a lot of mistakes and mental errors, some mental errors that you didn't see from either team when the Stallions put on a great showing against a great Hot Shots team last week, or when the Iron were able to shut out the Express last week as well. Those mistakes did end up culminating in the first points of the game, though, when the Iron muffed a punt and Salt Lake used the excellent field position to get Joel, what's his last name again? You know this.
Boanyan.
Yes. Into the end zone. And then in a...
Or Buonyo.
Buonyo. Yeah, Buonyo. Anyway, so Salt Lake is up, and then in a very interesting coaching decision, the Iron attempted a fake punt while on their own 34 right at the end of the second quarter and didn't convert, and the Stallions were able to kick a field goal to make it 9-0 at half. The announcers were confused by the call. AAF Twitter was very confused by the call. It didn't really make much sense. Just punt that ball and try to go into halftime, minimizing your losses there. The offenses continued to stall until another special teams miscue where the Stallions muffed the punt and the Iron recovered it to make the score 9-6. And then guess what happened next? The offenses continued to not be good. Bertolet, the kicker for the Stallions, missed his second field goal of the game, and defense continued to dominate. And then a lucky unnecessary roughness penalty gave the Iron offense some life. They were able to punch it in with Richardson from the 2 to make it 12-9. The Iron would come out on top after the Stallions missed the 48-yard game-tying field goal with 1 minute and 3 seconds left in the game. And this game was almost purely decided by field position and mistakes. The defenses played decently, but it just didn't feel like either offense had really any idea how to move the ball, which was interesting considering how well both of them played last week.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. If you look at the box score, neither team got over 260 yards. Both teams averaged under 4 yards per play, and time of possession was pretty even. Still very strange altogether, and not a very thrilling one to put on the major network.
No, it wasn't.
TNT.
It was exciting to watch the defenses ball out and play like that, but just to not really see much offense at all, kind of made it. It wasn't boring per se. I still really enjoyed watching, but it just wasn't that edge of your seat stuff. So my first story of the game is going to be the lack of Iron offense. We saw them play really well in the second half against Memphis. Perez and Quentin Patton had an excellent connection, but that just wasn't there this week. Richardson was held to Trent Richardson, their running game, was only held to 41 yards on 19 carries, only averaging 2.2 yards per carry. Luis Perez was 24 for 38, which not a bad completion percentage, but only 184 yards. I have no idea how you only get 184 yards throwing the ball 38 times. That just seems crazy. The play calling on offense is absolutely going to have to improve if the Iron want to keep winning. When your running back is your leading receiver, which Richardson was, it's not a great sign. The Iron O-line also didn't seem as dominant as they were against the Express either. Perez needed to just dump the ball off to Richardson, which is why he was the leading receiver there, and he was sacked 3 times and hit 6 times as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up dumping the ball off to Richardson, because I remember that one specific play where I thought that Luis Perez was going to get sacked in the end zone for a safety, and he just tossed a prayer out to the right side for Richardson, and he got like a 20-yard gain out of that.
Yeah, it was just they were under constant pressure. The O-line, they proved me right the last week where they really protected Perez well, but this second week, it just didn't look like they had that cohesiveness that they had the week before.
Yeah, another thing with the Iron offense that I noticed was Luis Perez is still searching for his first touchdown of the year. For being one of the most impressive QBs in the league, he still doesn't have a passing touchdown through 2 weeks of football. I don't think he has a rushing touchdown either. So these NFL teams that have reportedly all offered him contracts, don't you want to see touchdown production?
Yeah, I think that's really surprising too. I do think it's going to end up coming down to offensive play calling for the Iron. Their defense is looking fine and solid. Of course, the teams they've played, like we said, the Stallions just didn't have much of an offense this game, and they played the Express, who we've seen not to have that much of an offense. So I don't know how good the Iron defense is, but they still are looking pretty solid. So they can maybe move more of their attention to the offensive side of the ball because they need to get the ball in the end zone here.
Yeah, and it's just they really need to improve upon that if they're going to continue to grow.
Yeah. So moving on to the other side of the ball, we're going to talk about the Stallions here for a second. The brightest part, I'd say, of either offense was this Stallions running game. After getting only 88 yards last week, the Stallions were able to amass 151 yards on the ground. And the tandem of Joel and Brandon Oliver put in work, each getting over 10 carries and more than 50 yards, which isn't great if you're looking at them in fantasy because you see this is really a dual back set here. But both of them had great production, so if you started either of them in fantasy, you should be feeling pretty good. If the Stallions had had any sort of passing game at all, I really could have seen them winning this game. But without Woodrum back there, it just doesn't seem like they have the ability to really throw the ball at all.
Yeah, that Stallions running back situation is in such a great spot that I really find it hard to believe that the Stallions won't be a force to be reckoned in the West whenever Woodrum's back and healthy.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a good team. They still seem solid all around. If they can, like I said, with the Iron, it's the same thing. If they can get their offense sparked, I think they're going to be really dangerous. Like, their secondary really stepped up this week. I had been worried about them before, particularly since they got shredded by Wolford, and they seem to really mature just in that 1 week. So my other really recap thing here and story of the game is special teams for both teams here. Special teams was really, really rough. Taylor Bertolet for the Stallions was 1 for 4 on his field goals. Though I will give it to them, they were all over 45 yards, and that really highlights the stagnation of the Stallions' offense. And Nick Novak for the Iron went 0 for 1. Punt returning wasn't much better either. Both teams muffed a punt, and both of those muffed punts resulted in the only 2 touchdowns of the game, which is kind of cool and shows you how important field position was in this game. And the Iron failing to convert a fake punt on their own half of the field gave the Stallions their 1 field goal.
Yeah, if we just want to repeat the score of this game, it was 12-9, and when Taylor Bertolet only went 1 of 4 on his field goals, if he converted just 2 of those 4 attempts, that game would have at least went into overtime, and Salt Lake, without their star quarterback, could have been in contention for their first win of the season.
Yeah, both teams. I wouldn't think that Nick Novak's going to be out of a job because he did play so well last week. He was the special teams player of the week last week, so he should
only missed 1.
Yeah, he should still be feeling safe. But Bertolet for the Stallions, he might be on the hot seat here. I don't know how easy it is to find another kicker in the AAF, but I'm sure that they might be trying some people out during practice this week.
Yeah, I remember watching that game. The one commentator, I think it was Marvin Lewis, but I might be wrong there. He was saying that, I'll tell you what I'd do next week. I'd find ourselves a new kicker.
Yeah.
And if Bertolet heard that, I'd be a bit sad.
He'd be hurt. So I was talking all about how really not impressive these offenses were, but the defenses did play well. I was talking about the Stallions secondary definitely stepped up. The Iron secondary continued to dominate after a dominant performance against Memphis last week. And the Iron defense was also excellent at ripping at the ball, and both of their forced fumbles were just pure determination and guys reaching in and ripping that ball out of the ball carrier's hands, which really shows how much they want to win on defense. And the Stallions' defensive line played great, limiting the Iron to only 47 total rushing yards and putting pressure on Perez play after play. If there's one big knock against the Iron rushing game, which they did get their one touchdown out of, was that they're still only averaging under 3 yards a carry. They averaged 2.5 the first game and 2.2 yards this second game. They're giving the ball to Richardson, and it's nice to see that he's able to catch, but they really need to get those average yards per carry number up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that defense though it's been made of steel. It's been stronger than iron. They have yet to give up more than 260 yards in either game they've played. They've only given up 9 points total through 2 games. It's just an all-around great performance by that defense. And I understand that the teams that they played are now 0-4, but it's still a great stat line to have for your defense.
Yeah, plus just the confidence that those kind of games give your defense are excellent for them to continue to produce through the rest of the season. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up with our game MVPs. I'm going to give mine to Trent Richardson. He had a rough day on the ground, but he was extremely useful in the passing game and really saved Perez a couple of times. He led the Iron in yards through the air and in receptions, and he was able to punch in that one touchdown for the Iron, so I have to give it to him there.
Yeah, I got to agree with you there. The fact that he led Trent Richardson is also my game MVP. The fact that he led the Iron receiving core and the rushing core as had the only offensive touchdown for the Iron, it was just a no-brainer for me. You can't really give the MVP to the punt coverage.
No, you can't. If anything, I'd give the MVP to whoever put butter on the balls or whatever was going on there.
Right.
So our next game, of course, was the Hot Shots at the Memphis Express on Saturday night, and the Hot Shots took this one in what ended up being a thriller, like you called, Derek. You wouldn't let me hear the end of that during this weekend. Hot Shots took it 20-18 over the Express. So we'll start with a recap here. The first half was the story of the Express defense doing absolutely what they needed to do to win. Just as they held the Iron to only field goals in the first half of their previous game, they stepped up even more and had a previously explosive Hot Shots offense looking like they had no idea what was going on and held them to 0 points, forced 3 turnovers, which included 2 picks and a strip sack. Zach Stacy was absolutely fantastic in the first half, rushing for 51 yards and a touchdown for Memphis here. And John Jasper also tacked on 2 field goals, and the Express went into halftime looking like a totally different team than last week, winning the halftime battle 12-0. That was just really impressive to me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was really nervous for my pick. I was only excited because your pick also might be wrong. It was crazy. The Express looked excellent all around. That running game was lethal. Zach Stacy is looking to be like he might turn out to be one of the best backs in the league, despite being on this weaker offensive team.
Mm-hmm. It's too bad leading going into halftime was a death wish this week.
Yeah, that was still so strange. Let me talk about the Hot Shots real quick in that first half. Their first 3 drives were abysmal, a 3-and-out, followed by back-to-back turnovers, a pick by Wolford, and then a fumble by Wolford. And just nothing was working for the Hot Shots in the first half, and they looked to be in serious trouble. Now, Hackenberg wasn't amazing for Memphis, but he didn't make too many mistakes, kept the ball in the Express's hands enough to keep the lead, and like I said, Zach Stacy was magical in that first half. Not much change until late in the third quarter when the Arizona offense was sparked by a huge run of 28 yards from Cook, and the Hot Shots were able to capitalize after a great throw and catch from that Wolford to Ross connection, who I would like to point out was my power player of the week, and he had a solid week, pulling in that 16-yard touchdown catch. Now, this is where things got even crazier because I was like, okay, Memphis is going to fall apart again, and the Hot Shots are going to take a commanding lead. But then the Express once again came out of nowhere. They responded with a huge run of their own. Zach Stacy ripped one for 49, and Hackenberg was able to finish the drive by running it in on 3rd and 3 from 4 yards out. He took a massive pop in the end zone, too, that drew a flag, and I was impressed he got up because he got cracked.
Happened a couple of times to him, too.
It did.
There was a sack where he got crushed.
Yeah, quarterbacks are getting popped in this league, which I think people like to see. So this was the last good thing you'd see out of the Express, though, as the Hot Shots then did what I thought was going to happen, and they took over. John Stockton ripped one up the middle for a sweet 45-yard touchdown, which was by far the best run of the week. The Hot Shots got the 2-point conversion, and then the defense stepped up, got them the ball back again, and then after another big play, a 64-yard catch from Josh Huff, they scored once again, and Memphis was unable to get a drive going after Hackenberg was marked short on a QB sneak, and the Hot Shots finished a spectacular comeback. This was a really exciting game this weekend. It was one of the best.
Yeah, I'd say the fourth quarter was more fun to watch than anything else, but
Yeah.
definitely there was a replay on NFL Network, and I turned it on just for the start of the fourth quarter, and I just had to sit down and watch it again because it was that much fun.
Oh, it was fantastic. So, some stories from this game. First of all, I think this is the most glaring thing for that Memphis offense, who looked really good on the ground. It's the fact that it doesn't look like Christian Hackenberg can throw more than 10 yards. If he could have thrown the ball past the sticks, maybe even once when they were down, the Express could have held this lead, but it just doesn't look like he can. It was all short passes. It was all to his running backs and things like that in the flats. And he didn't look like he had the confidence to chuck the ball down the field and keep drives alive.
Yeah, he's never really given his team the confidence in him that you need to see out of your starting quarterback. He's just yet to do anything that's really proved to his teammates that he's the guy.
Yeah.
And because of that, I don't think Mike Singletary really believes he's the guy either. And that's just kind of making him fall down the ladder.
I think something that, if you were watching the game at all, the AAF has all of these players mic'd up. You could hear Hackenberg complaining a lot during that first half. So I don't know if it was the fault of the coach or if it was Hackenberg, but communication didn't seem good. He was yelling. He was angry. A lot of the announcers were surprised that he actually was back in the game after some of his meltdowns there, because he kind of looked like a mess in that first half. I'm not sure what's going to happen this coming week in terms of quarterback, but I would not be surprised if Hackenberg is not the starter going into week 3.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I wouldn't be surprised either if Mike Singletary tried to go another direction next week.
Yeah.
0-2, you got nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest thing for me, though, on the other side of the ball, John Wolford, I really like the guy, don't get me wrong, he still had a good week, but he had some really costly turnovers. And he threw 2 picks that ended up being returned within his own 35-yard line, leading to a touchdown and a field goal for the Express. Had Wolford not thrown these costly picks, I don't know if the Express would have gotten up to the 18 points that they did. But even so, you can't be giving teams that kind of field positioning. You got to save the deep shots for whenever you're on the other side of the field.
No, you can't. And some of the throws, it looked like they were Wolford's fault. Like he was forcing balls into coverage that he didn't throw last week. Now, the Memphis Express defense, like we said, they do look legit. They look like the most legit part of this team, maybe besides Stacy. But they look like a solid team. They play fast, they play hard, they play strong. So you do have to be careful with the turnovers there, like you said.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the biggest story of this game was that fourth quarter comeback for the Hot Shots. Down
Spectacular
18-6. Down 18-6 with 12 minutes to go in the game. The Hot Shots needed to play near perfect football for them to come out of that game victorious. And let me tell you, they did.
Yeah.
Scored 2 touchdowns, converted a 2-point conversion to give them 14 points and just enough to down the Express. That John Stockton touchdown run was easily the best play I've seen.
It was beautiful.
It might be the best thing I've seen all year, let alone just this week.
Maybe the best play in AAF history, Derek. I'm saying it right now, after 2 weeks.
And the preseason. If you haven't seen this run yet, I highly recommend that you go over to social media and find it. It is just a sight. And that following drive, that Josh Huff 64-yard reception put the Hot Shots in the red zone, and that was also a really nice play.
Mm-hmm.
To say that the Hot Shots have the clutch gene would be an understatement.
Yeah, they're well coached. They are disciplined. They don't fear in the face of pressure, and I think they're going to be a dangerous team, despite it being so close with a team who didn't score a single point last week.
Yeah. Couple real quick notes. The third down efficiency was terrible for both teams.
Yes, it was.
Memphis went 5 of 17, went on third down. Arizona went 3 of 12. Both teams really need to work on their third down plays because unless you're playing a team that's also not good at converting third downs, these low conversion rates aren't going to cut it.
Yeah, I've noticed this across the league. It seems like a lot of these teams are struggling on third down, and this could just be quarterbacks need to settle in because a lot of the time, of course, they're running it because it's going to be they're passing it. It's going to be a 3rd and 4 or longer. So I think it might just come with time as the quarterbacks, particularly the ones who seem to be the established starters now, as they get more used to playing football again.
It's very true. And another thing is, I want to give some love over to the punters.
Oh, yeah.
Brad Wing had a game, and I don't think anybody noticed. The Memphis punter, Brad Wing, was a huge reason that the Express led this game through 3 quarters. He had 7 punts for 299 yards, a 42-yard average, and even hit one for 52.
Oof.
He had 3 punts that landed inside of the Arizona 10-yard line, and off of his 7 punts, the furthest upfield the Hotshots ever got was the 30-yard line.
That's really, really good.
That is all-pro punting right there. Wing constantly gave the Hotshots a long field to cover, which made scoring against that team with a defensive strength pretty difficult. And Brad Wing, I just want to let you know that I noticed you. Keep balling out.
There we go. That's what we love to see. We love to see those special teamers playing well, particularly since they aren't getting a chance to do kickoffs anymore. So now the punters got to shine. Once again, in this game, as a final note, big plays were key. The Hotshots comeback was completed on the back of big plays like we just talked about, and Zach Stacy's 49-yard run was almost able to serve as the nail in the coffin for the Hotshots as they were trying to make a comeback. So if you're a team who can explode and make a big play when it matters, things are looking good for you right now.
Absolutely. Real quickly, game MVP for me, John Wolford. He didn't have as good of a game as he did last week, and he looked kind of rusty in the first half, but he came up huge when it mattered. On the 2 touchdown drives at the end of the game, he went 4 of 5 for 117 yards and a touchdown, and if that's not worthy of being a top quarterback in this league, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I'd have to totally agree with you there. I think how Wolford made his adjustments and came into that second half with some fire in his eyes was excellent. So I agree with you there, and I think my game MVP is going to have to be whatever was said in the locker room of the Hotshots during halftime, because they came out and they played some grown man football, and it was excellent to watch.
Rick Neuheisel had to put together a fantastic speech. And
I wish I could have heard it. I wish I could have heard it.
And that'll be the end of the Saturday games. And we'll move into early Sunday. Well, early. They started at 4 p.m.
Well, when you're a college student, 4 p.m. is you just woke up.
I guess so. I get up a little bit earlier than that.
I'm pushing it most of the time.
So the Orlando Apollos take on the San Antonio Commanders at San Antonio for their 2nd straight home game. And the Apollos pulled it out. But just as I thought it would be, this game was certainly the best game of the bunch. This game also the best attendance of the AAF, as the people in San Antonio came out even stronger than they did in the home opener to support the Commanders. They had 29,176 people show up. That was I think it was around 2,000 more
2,000.
people showed up for week 2 than week 1.
That's really impressive.
And normally, attendance numbers go down as the season drags on, not up. So I think this tells you how hungry San Antonio is for football.
Yeah, picking San Antonio as a city to put an AAF team in was just an excellent call by Charlie and Bill Polian. They obviously wanted it because people are showing up. I wouldn't be surprised if the number stays around 29,000 next week or even maybe goes up. It might be slight. It might be a slight increase, but I could see it going up once again for their next home game.
Yeah, there were the people who were at the games, the reporters said that they were impressed with how loud it was getting. And personally, if I was to go to an AAF game, I would love to go to a Commanders game at home, see the team play. I think that would be just such a great experience.
Yeah, hint, hint, San Antonio. Fly us out.
I would be beyond grateful if that happened. The Commanders did play very good in the first half, going up 12-0 at the end of the first quarter, with both of my sits of the week, Kenneth Farrow and Logan Woodside, scoring touchdowns. in that first quarter.
It's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has
Apollos
those days.
also looked very out of sync, getting called for 12 players in formation on a couple of occasions, and finished the quarter with a measly 6 yards.
Oof.
But after the first quarter, the Apollos started acting like themselves again, and they recovered with a 210-yard second quarter, and they went into half only down by 1 point, which was a field goal scored as time ran out to give the Commanders back the lead. From there, it only got better for the Apollos. They had an incredible 362 yards passing, and the Commanders kept it close throughout the entire game, but once the Apollos got rolling, everyone just knew that the game would be all theirs.
This game was really impressive. The Commanders came to play. I'm sure the home field advantage really helped. They look like a great team. The Apollos also are looking like a great team. I know some people on AAF Twitter were saying this might be a preview of the championship game in Las Vegas. So these two teams both look really, really strong.
I just want to point out that that was the championship that I predicted before the season started as well.
Oh boy. My championship game looks shot. But, yeah, well, I'm impressed, Eric, if that's what you
Key
want to
players for this game: Garrett Gilbert, 393 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 2-point conversion.
Oof.
Charles Johnson is number 1 wide receiver, 7 receptions, 192 yards, and a touchdown. I was beyond impressed.
Monster game. Absolute perfection.
Both kickers, Elliott Fry and Nick Rose, were both 3 of 3. Fantastic games on both sides of special teams there. Logan Woodside, he had 223 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And Kenneth Farrow added 74 yards and a touchdown. So hopefully you didn't sit them like I told you to. Hopefully. Major stories.
Yeah, stories. Go ahead.
Charles Johnson, the wide receiver I just talked about for the Apollos, he came out of nowhere. Week 1, he had 4 catches for 60 yards, which is a very good day.
Yeah, that
and
is.
then week 2, no one in the Commanders secondary was capable of covering him. They tried at least 3 different corners on him, and he burned all of them. 192 yards and a touchdown. He was unstoppable. His route running ability is nasty, and I can't imagine any NFL team does not want to sign him. The double moves were they were something to be seen.
So, going into this game, I thought that it was going to be Ishmael Hyman, who was going to be their number 1 receiver. That was dead wrong. He was actually at the bottom. I think he only had 1 target or something. He had looked solid week 1, so I thought maybe he was going to get that number 1 position. But the Apollos looked like absolute geniuses putting Charles Johnson in at 1. He absolutely torched that Commander secondary. And my one player to watch from last week, Jalen Marshall, it did what I thought it was going to do. Now, I thought Charles Johnson would be Ishmael Hyman. Of course, doesn't matter who it is as long as they're opening up the play. And Jalen Marshall also was able to come away with a solid game. I know he had a touchdown catch. So that Apollo's receiving core is looking fantastic right now.
Yeah. Speaking of the main reason that receiving core is looking so good, Garrett Gilbert continues to impress me. Like, this marks his 2nd game in a row that he has over 220 yards and 2 touchdowns, continuing to prove that he's one of the, if not the best quarterback in the Alliance. His completion percentage for the year is around 65%, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
And the passes he's been making has impressed me the most. Those Charles Johnson passes were not all easy to hit.
No, they were long balls. And I think after watching this game, Gilbert has to move into number 1 for me personally for my quarterback rankings, just because Wolford looked good and he had that great comeback, but he did struggle. He threw 2 picks, but Gilbert still looks perfect right now.
Yeah, Steve Spurrier is making some great coaching decisions for him, and I think it's just only going to get better for them. I think Spurrier will get more and more creative, and this Apollos team is just getting better each week.
Yes, they are.
However, I do think I found the weakness for the Orlando team. We talked about how 3rd down efficiency isn't necessarily good for every team, and Orlando was only able to convert 2 third downs that entire game against the Commanders. Mm-hmm. The only problem is getting the Apollos on 3rd down. That only happened 7 times against the Commanders compared to the 19.
Yeah, that just shows the big playability that the Apollos are rocking with those receivers. only going to third down 7 times in an entire game is a remarkable feat. And then your defense being able to hold the other team to 19 third downs just shows how complete of a team they are.
Yeah, it's just really great stuff for the Apollos. And if you get them on third down, they don't have a high conversion rate. So if you can get them there, you got a good chance of getting the ball back.
Yeah.
Problem is, again, doing that. Despite the 7 third downs, a lot of the 37 points scored against them, I'm still high on this San Antonio defense.
Oh, I thought they really impressed me. They did.
Mm-hmm. They still had 4 sacks in that game. They held the Apollos to 66 rushing yards. And they even stripped Gilbert and returned the fumble for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think...
So if you...
Go ahead.
If you have them in fantasy, don't drop them because they're really... Despite this 37-point performance, they're still a top unit in the league.
Oh, yeah, I think when it comes to their line, that's really their strength here, getting pressure on the quarterback. Like I said, I thought Akeem Hunt was going to have a great game. He did not at all. So there's my one fantasy player who I hope nobody listened to me about because he was stuffed, absolutely stuffed. He had nowhere to run. That defensive line is scary for San Antonio. Their secondary needs some work, but really I think Charles Johnson is just a freak of an athlete and a great receiving talent, so I'm not sure if they could really done much there. I'd like to flip it over real quick to the offensive side of the ball for San Antonio. Logan Woodside looks solid. You talked about him. He made some great throws. There was one throw. He threw it in a tight window. I saw a replay on Twitter. There were 3 defenders around his receiver, and he jammed it in there. It was an excellent throw, 15 yards. He also had a nice throw and a great catch from, I believe it was DeMarcus Ayers. He had a great one-handed snag. And Mikhail McKay had a slow week this week. I think that's because of, my player to watch. I'll talk about him in a second. But they still have a great receiving core as well. And you said Kenneth Farrow, right? Yeah. He had a great game as well. So that San Antonio team is looking to be scary. Right now, we're looking at the Apollos, the Hotshots, and it looks to be like the Commanders as the top 3 teams in the league.
I don't know. I'm not as high as Logan Woodside as you are, but DeMarcus Ayers did have a great game. He had 5 receptions for 80 yards. He had 8 targets. Mikhail McKay still had 9, so don't be going down on him yet. He's still getting a ton of targets. He's still getting a lot of looks from Woodside. And now Ayers is too. So if you need another wide receiver, look no further.
Mm-hmm.
Game MVP for me, got to be Garrett Gilbert. Another incredible game for the quarterback. I went over his stats a little bit earlier. 220 yards, 2 touchdowns. Freakishly good completion percentage. Without him, I don't know how good this Apollos team is, but Steve Spurrier and Gilbert have a fantastic connection, and I can't wait to see how this keeps continuing forward.
So, due to the great play out of the Apollos this week, I had to give an offensive and defensive MVP. On offense, it was Charles Johnson, 192, a touchdown. Perfect execution. That connection with Gilbert was incredible. So he's going to be my offensive MVP for the week. And my defensive MVP is going to be the player I said to watch from the Apollos defense during our game previews for this week, and that is Keith Rieser. He had 2 tackles, 3 passes defended, and that beautiful game-sealing pick 6. He was excellent. He's looking to be the best cornerback in the AAF right now.
You got something right. Congrats.
Hey, look at me.
Anything else?
No, I think that's good. We can move on to the final game of the weekend.
All right. The final game, of course, was the Atlanta Legends taking on the San Diego Fleet at the first professional football game in over 2 years in San Diego. And the Fleet did not disappoint. It was a terrible day in San Diego, do not get me wrong. The Fleet were coming up big in their home opener. Mother Nature started raining on the game right as the first snap started, and she never let up throughout that entire game. But the torrential downpour in San Diego did not stop the Fleet star running back, Jaquan Gardner, from churning out 104 yards and 2 touchdowns.
That boy is nice. He is nice.
He had a great game. But, however, it didn't start that way.
Nope.
Much like last week, the Legends got out to an early lead. They scored a field goal and a touchdown and had a 9-0 lead at the end of the first quarter. But after that, there isn't much to talk about for the Legends. They would give up 2 field goals going into half, but they would still have that lead 9-6. However, at halftime, Mike Martz recouped that Fleet squad. They came back strong with a game-tying 26-yard field goal off a long drive in the third quarter, and they followed that up with 2 Jaquan Gardner touchdowns to take the lead and officially bury the Legends at their home field 24-12. Some key players of that game, Jaquan Gardner, once again, we're going to be saying his name a lot, so get used to it. 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. That Fleet offensive line got better this week. They only gave up 3 sacks, and they certainly were a big factor to why Jaquan Gardner was having a great week. And Donnie Hagerman, the kicker, was 4 of 4 for field goals for the Fleet.
That was excellent performance on special teams for the Fleet this week.
Yep, a couple of people that impressed me for the Legends. Fleet's running back, Akram Wadley. He had 8 receptions for 70 yards. He had a couple of carries, but he had 81 yards after the catch, but only 70 receiving yards, which means that he's catching screens and he's doing something with them, and he's making Matt Sims look better than he could be. And Young Ho Koo, however it's pronounced.
I'm pretty sure it's Young Wei. I believe you now. I heard the announcer saying Young Wei, so we're going to go with Young Wei.
He was 2 of 2 for field goals for the Fleet. He has been the highest scorer for the team, and he probably will continue to be that.
That's what it seems like.
So another disappointing day for the Legends. The Fleet get their first win of the season, and we're very happy for them.
Yeah, bringing W's back to San Diego.
But with every good win comes a pretty bad Legends performance. The Legends are they're a first quarter team. It's the only way I can put this team.
Yeah, that's true. I'd agree.
In the first quarter, the Legends are outscoring teams 12-0.
Hey,
they're
applause.
winning. If
Claps
the games
all around.
were 15 minutes long, the Legends would be 2-0.
There we go.
But they're not. After the first quarter ends, the Legends are obliterated 62-3.
That's really rough. Yeah. Yeah.
So in my opinion, this means one of 2 things. Kevin Coyle is really good at scripting plays for the Legends to start with, and once they got to call plays based on situations, they crumble. Or the Legends have a very easy to diagnose game plan that teams figure out after 1 quarter of playing them.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one I lean towards. I would think it might just be like he's good at scripting and not game scenario plays because he played a great Apollo's defense. But the Fleet defense is good, but not great. So it almost seems like the other coaches are just able to figure out what the heck they're doing and know exactly how to counter it pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't know what to do for this Legends team. I would love to figure it out, but in my honest opinion, I don't know which one of those 2 it is yet.
Yeah.
But I just hope that either they can extend the first quarter strengths that they have or figure out a way to get around it. Because 62-3 after the first quarter is just not good at all.
No, it's not.
Speaking of the Legends, Matt Sims was better, but not great. Sims had a stat line that was far better than his previous one. He went 17 of 25 for 170 yards with a touchdown and a pick. However, he isn't throwing the ball downfield whatsoever. It's almost like Kevin Coyle and the team is afraid of the moments that Sims has to throw more than 10 yards because he's not going to hit it.
Yeah.
I recall multiple plays where he was throwing the ball into his team's shoes. And take Akram Wadley, for example. He had 70 receiving yards, but he had 81 receiving yards after the catch, which means that they're not throwing the ball to him downfield.
No, it's just these quick screens. I think the best Legends play was a quick screen to Wadley where he took it, I think it was maybe 40-some yards. It was a great run and everything. But once again, it was just Matt Sims having to make a dump pass on a screen.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a wide receiver get more yards after the catch than receiving yards, though?
No, I don't think so.
It's just an incredible stat line.
That's crazy. Now, I will give Sims some credit. It looks like the Legends offensive line is pretty garbage. I'm not going to lie. He was getting crushed both before and after throws. There were a couple times where he let the ball go and just got walloped, and it was painful to watch. The run game for the Legends is struggling too, so I thought previously that the Fleet might have the worst offensive line, but I think that honor is going to go to the Legends after this week.
That honor.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Congratulations, you win.
Yeah, you win worst offensive line ever.
Now flipping over to the Fleet, Philip Nelson, who started at quarterback for the Fleet, he did not look good.
No.
Even though the Fleet won this game, he, again, didn't look good. 14 of 30 for 142 yards and a pick. I understand that it was a torrential downpour during this game, and there were multiple drops by his receivers that were some pretty catchable balls.
Yeah.
But there were multiple throws that hit his receivers in the shoes, not the numbers. And while he was getting sacked, he tossed a prayer over his head that should have been picked off, but somehow ended up in his tight end's hands.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. That was a strange play. I'm sure no coach would ever advocate that a quarterback throws that ball ever. It actually got the attention of Patrick Mahomes on Twitter, and he said that it looks like he's going to have to step up his game next season with those crazy passes, since Philip Nelson can just throw balls behind his back and have receivers catch them. But I highly doubt that is what he thought was going to happen. He's very lucky that is what happened, though.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to throw the ball out of bounds to not get hit with the sack, but you can't throw the ball in play if you're going to do that.
Nope.
So because of his shaky play, you got to see that the Fleet are powered by Jaquan Gardner.
Yep.
Make no mistake about it, the Fleet are a dangerous team if and only if Jaquan Gardner is having a good game. He's averaging 6.9 yards per carry, and Mike Martz doubled his carries this week, and the Fleet offense had a pretty deadly weapon that the Legends had zero response to. Plus, that run game will in turn reduce the blitz against their quarterback, who was not that great, giving more time for Nelson to throw in the future and hopefully increasing his stat line.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap up this game with game MVPs, and for me, this is a no-brainer. It's Jaquan Gardner. There's no doubt about it. He's shifty, he's fast, he's got power. He's really looking like one of the most complete backs in the league right now, and he seems to be the heart and soul of this Fleet offense.
Yeah, it's hard to pass up a running back that has over 100 yards and both offensive touchdowns for your team.
Yep.
Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah, he did. He had
I don't
two.
think Philip Nelson did not have a touchdown that game. So it's just with that, he's got to be the team MVP, let alone the game MVP. No-brainer.
He had a spectacular game. All right, so that is our recap for the week. We're going to move into our little segment where we were right and where we were wrong. We, of course, talked about a lot of this back in what we said during the game recaps, but we just like to run it over at the end of each episode. So where we were right, I said that the Hotshots had to be careful, but, Derek, I will give it to you. You said that this was going to happen. It could be a trap game for the Hotshots, so you can go ahead and have your moment of glory. Take it away.
One of my correct predictions, I said that the Arizona-Memphis game, it happened almost exactly how I had predicted it.
Yes.
It was a trap game for Arizona. That would be closer than we expect for Arizona, but Arizona's just more talented, and they will pull it out late. And I had Zach Stacy saying that he would have a good game for Memphis, and he would be the only offensive piece. And I got everything right I could about that game.
Yeah,
honestly.
That was a great game for you. I personally said to be careful with Zach Stacy. Now, to my credit, I never said sit him, and I actually had to start him in my fantasy league. But I was not too keen on him. I didn't think the Memphis offense was going to get anything going, and you did call it there. Stacy had an excellent game.
Yes, I did.
So for me, what I got right, both my Apollos players to watch, Jalen Marshall and Keith Rieser, they showed up. They had great games. I was proud of them. And my power player, Rashad Ross, he wasn't the best receiver this week. That was Charles Johnson by far. But if you put him in your lineup, he had 16.2 points on Alt Fantasy Sports, so he was a solid start at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I also did say that Jaquan Gardner could be a fantasy star, and hey, he was. So I did get some things right, just not where it was important, which was the game picks, where you got every game right. So
Yeah, I was one of the things I got right.
Yeah.
I went 4-0 this week in game predictions. I'm 7-1 on the season. So I may not be great at picking the fantasy players, but at least I can get the games right.
Oh, boy. All right, so we'll move into where we were wrong because we are wrong quite often. I said that Akeem Hunt and Mikael McKay would be good fantasy plays. They were not at all. I believe Akeem Hunt had -4 yards, so that was pretty bad.
It's not a
Jarrell
great
Presley, I thought, would be solid as well. He had a lot of carries. He just wasn't very productive. And then the Legends maybe being decent this game. I was dead wrong about that again. I think they still can improve, but they got to get that offensive line going. They got to throw the ball deep. They have so much to fix. It might take a little while.
Yeah, there were a couple of minor things I got wrong, but the main one to kind of hit on for me, I had Kenneth Farrell and Logan Woodside as passes. Although they didn't win the game, they both had pretty good fantasy games, and if you started them in your league, you're definitely not disappointed with how they played.
Yep, so there we go. That's what we got right, what we got wrong. We're hoping to start moving it even more to the getting things right category, but it's football. Things are crazy. This is a brand new league. We're probably going to be getting a lot more wrong as we go through. But hey, it's all fun and games.
Can't predict the future.
No, we can't. We're going to go ahead and close out this episode here with our post-week 2 power rankings. So at number 1, this one feels pretty obvious. We have the Apollos rocking at number 1. They put up 40 points week 1, 37 points week 2, and beat a very, very good Commanders team this week. So they are in our number 1 spot here.
Yep, Steve Spurrier along with Garrett Gilbert just proves to be a deadly duo that no one has an answer for. No-brainer for them to be number 1. Number 2, we have the Arizona Hotshots. Although they did put up a really fantastic week 1 game, the slow start against the Express really made us kind of doubt them being number 1. So we slotted them in at number 2 since they were able to come back and win that game, and they have a very good offense.
Yep. Number 3, we have the Commanders. That defense is really going to carry them far, but their offense also looked very good, putting up 29 points on an excellent Apollos defense. So that's why we have them at number 3, despite them being 1-1 right now.
Yep. Number 4, we have the other 2-0 team, the Iron. Although that they are 2-0, their quarterback has yet to throw for a passing touchdown, and if Trent Richardson hasn't scored a touchdown, I don't know how well the Iron would be doing.
That's true.
So simply put, we have them below the Commanders. It's close, but we have them slightly below them at number 4.
Yep. At number 5 and kind of 6 here, because this one, when we were discussing, we kind of had it up in the air. We do have the Fleet at 5 and the Stallions at 6. We have the Fleet at 5 just because they looked a little better here. Jaquan Gardner looks like he's going to really carry this team, and it seems like they're going to be able to get things going. Now, the Stallions, if Woodrum comes back next week, they will probably pretty easily hop the Fleet here. They still look like they have nowhere to go but up, and I think they might end the season as a much stronger team than they look like right now. So we could see those two positions flip, but right now we have the Fleet at 5 and the Stallions at 6.
And the final ones, no-brainers. Number 7, we have the Express. After getting shut out week 1, they were only down by 2 against the number 2 team in our power rankings, number 1 at the time. That's got to move you up a little bit, so we have them at 7. And the Legends are just flat out terrible outside of the first quarter, so it just makes sense to put them at number 8. Sorry to all the Atlanta fans. We are also surprised.
Some people might argue the Express should be a little higher because they kept it close with the Hotshots. But when you look at Hackenberg's play right now, they really have nothing going. And if they play a team that can stop the run like the Commanders did against the Apollos, their offense is probably going nowhere unless if whoever they put in quarterback instead of Hackenberg, if he ends up on the bench, can actually throw the ball deep. So that's why we're keeping the Express at 7, because a team, sure, defense can win championships, but if your offense can score almost no points, then you're in trouble. So, yep.
Absolutely. And with that, we conclude the 6th episode of AAF Analyzed.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you stay tuned for our Week 3 preview, which will come out Friday at some point, most likely in the morning. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed. But until then,
peace out and play football.
Thank you for listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at AAF Analyzed and feel free to contact the show to have your questions featured on a future episode. And don't forget to check out the show on all other platforms such as iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube.